genre.
This is it, folks. You just heard the first of the final 8 episodes of Geek by Night. I don't know about you, but I do not see that door. Welcome to Beyond Geek by Night, where we go behind the scenes of the Geek by Night podcast. On today's show, we will be discussing the 37th episode, Filling the Void. So get out your tissues, get those redemption arcs ready, because we're about to go beyond Geek by Night. I'm your host, Matt Bennett. I am joined today, as always, by writer and creator Scott Carelli.
Hello.
Writer, executive producer, and voice of William Medina, Nick Jimenez.
Hello.
Writer and executive producer, Cass Fredrickson.
Hello.
And executive producer, casting director, and voice of Gretchen West, Chelsi Kern.
Howdy.
In this episode, Filling the Void, our heroes sift through the rubble that was once Underdog Comics. Knowing that William will be tracking them down, they descend to their sort of danger room, which Lorelei has always kept off the books. After being digitized, they are transported to a blank void and swiftly separated into a large maze. Traveling in small groups, they must make their way back to each other. Along the way, we catch up with all of our underdogs as they examine their new reality and reflect on the events that have transpired. When the gang is all finally back together, they come out of the simulation only to realize that 6 months has gone by. Billy has widely distributed the origin particle to create a new generation of supers, and even worse, they missed Halloween. Not only that, but bizarro versions of our heroes arrive to apprehend them, while Billy welcomes the underdogs to a whole new world. Welcome back, everybody. This is really exciting. We're beginning the final stretch of Geek by Night here.
Yeah, I forgot how good you are at the recaps.
Thank you. So, now that we're entering this final stretch, only 7 more after this episode, I wanted to ask the writers, is Filling the Void the beginning of the end for Geek by Night, or is there still more to happen to kind of set up and frame this big finale that's coming?
Nick, I'd love for you to field this one.
I don't know. I'm kind of worried. I don't want you to negate whatever I say. I'm worried I'm going to be like this.
Wow.
That's because it's this process has been so long. I would say the answer that I've kind of thought up for this question is if you were to just go straight from the long con to the finale, or if you were to go from Filling the Void to the final episode of the show, you would be, I think, very confused.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of game left to be played and a lot of story left to be told. But I do think this is definitely like the beginning of Deathly Hallows. Like, there is no going back. There is kind of no return to normalcy. It is kind of like the first chapter of like, well, what do we do now? What's the status quo now that like the shop is gone and we really have no normal to return to?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing to come home to. Yeah. So this episode is pretty unconventional in structure and tone. Was this episode, in terms of characters kind of interacting with each other and catching up with each other and us catching up with them, was that something that was done just to serve this point of the story, or was this an idea, something that you wanted to do and finally got around to being able to write?
I'm trying to remember because it was like 3 years ago we were breaking this one. I think Scott was like, "Hey, we should do an episode where we break everyone up into smaller groups and kind of have it be like a little play." And so the intention behind that was normally for like the recording process, and I know I'm kind of like eating into a question that Chelsi's going to answer later, but so we normally do like a table read and then everyone goes off and records their lines independently. But for this one, we recorded it over like a Zoom call, so it was intended to be like our actors acting off of each other instead of just doing multiple takes and imagining what the other characters are saying or how they're acting, which was a really cool experience. And I really enjoyed like exploring these different groups of characters, because I think we specifically paired a few of these off where it's like, well, these two have never interacted with each other before. Like, what does that look like, and what does that what is the theme that they're going to be kind of working through? Like, what conflict are they going to be working through before we get out of the maze?
I also just want to add too that it was I saw this as sort of the last opportunity for these kinds of conversations in the remainder of the show. But that was at the time. There is actually another opportunity that I can't wait to get to that episode, but we're a ways out from that one. But it was also a thing, and I don't want this to sound like I am downplaying Cass at all, because Cass killed it this season and did so many amazing things.
Thank you.
But like, I also wanted there to be another episode that I call a Cass special, which is just characters talking about their feelings.
Yeah.
Because it's what they're best at writing, and I didn't want to get so lost in the plot of these last episodes that we didn't have another opportunity for Cass to just absolutely like wreck on a script.
Thank you.
And so I just thought that this was a really special opportunity for them to really stand out as, you know, a voice for the show.
And the episode really stands out. There's some very affecting and interesting groupings in this episode. Were there any that you found particularly fun or challenging to write? Any that were sort of unexpected in the writing process?
So I have a confession to make. I specifically, when Scott was outlining all of these, I specifically called dibs on the Elliot, Gretchen, and Gibson one, because I have been trying to break up Elliot and Gretchen since I think the Christmas special. And so that was the first one I wrote, and like Scott sent us the outline. I read the outline. I was like, okay, cool. So I wrote that thing in like 2 hours, and I'm just like, here you go. So that's not necessarily like, I don't know that it's necessarily the best one, or the most interesting one, or like the most challenging one, but it's like kind of my favorite. I don't know.
Ready for it.
I remember having a lot of fun. I mean, it's no one's secret that listens to Beyond Geek by Night that Janet is like my favorite kid. And I just have a lot of feelings about her, and like but I like putting her through the ringer and really challenging her. And so I think all three of us really liked the idea of pairing her with Joel and Gwen for different reasons, and really kind of giving her a break from Madison, to be honest. And so like that one was really fun, getting her to actually be with kind of more softer characters that can kind of be a little bit more sympathetic towards her, and kind of like have her ask these questions that she's had about herself but hasn't really had the space to verbalize. And I remember that being really kind of emotional, actually, of being like, finding like, oh my God, is this kind of why this character means so much to me? Like, it's really cool as a writer when you can kind of like learn stuff as the character is learning them, and kind of like, oh, I don't think I'm like guiding this character by the hand. I think we're really like side by side in this moment.
Yeah.
And also like the Cosmo Max scene was just really, really fun. And Mindy is in such an interesting position during that scene. I think she says it. She's like, why am I being the responsible one right now? This is not, I did not sign up for this.
Yeah, because so much of this episode is kind of reckoning with how far a lot of these characters have come. You know, Gibson in particular is very much contrasts with what he was like at the beginning of the show. We got to hear more about Mindy growing up around Mjolnir comics and things like that. So that does sound really interesting to kind of like follow the characters into this rather than pulling them in.
Yeah, that particular section of the script was the most meaningful for me, because between that and the Underdog Comics Center of the Maze scene, that was essentially me saying goodbye to the show. And the way that they were saying goodbye to that shop, that was like me coming to terms with like this show that has meant so much to me, but also I have kind of grown out of in a lot of ways and am ready to say goodbye to. But I'm always going to look back on fondly. And so, yeah, I know when I took my passes on those scenes in particular, those were emotional writing sessions, to be sure. Yeah, but I also want to shout out, I know Cass has only mentioned the one scene, but the Swift Sisters scene was another one really that sweet. They wrote, and I feel like I feel like I did not outline that
no,
one.
You
I think
didn't.
I just yeah.
So
I told them a vibe, and that was basically it.
That was the hardest one because you're so good at outlining, and so Scott sometimes will just like write an outline, and then other times he'll just be like, "Okay, here's the vague like vibe of this. Have fun." And I'm like, "That what am I gonna do?" Like I know, like so it's very difficult sometimes to kind of like, you know, assemble all the pieces and then like build from there.
Sometimes though, I just have a gut feeling that whatever I write in this outline isn't going to be as good as what these two knuckleheads come up with without my holding their hand. And I think they get frustrated in those moments, but I think the Swift Sister scene speaks for itself. Yeah. So
thank you.
You know,
that was also very emotional.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I it's so funny. I can't do this with every character, but I have a very clear memory years and years and years ago of like being at my home back in Texas on Slack, back when we used Slack.
Right?
Yeah.
And kind of forming Lorelai and Charlie with Scott back and forth. But like, you know, what if her name was Lorelai? Or what if she had this kind of like 10th Doctor, Tony Stark vibe, you know? But but that's ironic because I think after reading The Blind Spot, but then definitely listening to The Blind Spot, this really lovely, organic, unspoken thing happened where I think Scott and I both felt that the Swift sisters, like Cass really wrote like the definitive version of that relationship and that chemistry. And so we were really excited to give those characters, could give Cass the space to really like let those characters bounce off each other again, like that amazing like kitchen scene. And so like that was really, really cool to listen to. And then giving Naomi and Rachel the chance to like kind of bounce off each other organically as well.
It felt like almost a culmination with those two characters. It was interesting listening through, and I realized just how far the two of them have come as sisters, as characters, and, you know, interacting with everybody else, kind of taking stock of everything that they went through in losing Henry and being betrayed by Billy and everything. It was just really emotionally cathartic to hear them kind of hash it all out together.
Also, in terms of like overall satisfaction from a scene, the one we haven't mentioned yet is the Madison Victor Simon scene. That one was extremely satisfying because the reveal of how long Victor had been gone from his perspective, that was a long time coming, and Simon's reaction to Victor's revelation was a long time coming. So that was just like a very satisfying scene to finally put out there.
For sure.
And Madison she's so funny in that scene.
Yes.
For real.
Just having the dynamics of everybody bouncing off each other. It was really great to just kind of spend time letting them organically sort of fill the room together. I imagine creatively too, it was very satisfying to write characters that are typically funnier or lighter, you know, such as Max or Joel, have these moments of real tenderness or understanding.
Sincerity.
With each other. Especially Max. I think, you know, we've watched him come so far, and hearing him reach this level of reconciliation with Cosmo was really great for both of their characters. For Cosmo, it felt like kind of closing an arc, and for Max, it felt like kind of following through with some of the changes and self-challenges that he's been going through the last few episodes. I wanted to ask Chelsi, who plays Gretchen, on the show about the recording process. You know, how was Cass already mentioned a little bit about how this was different from other episodes, but what was it like from the actor's perspective, doing something a little more live, a little more open, a little less structured?
It was a lot of fun. This was the one and only time that any of us got to like record live together, I think, at least for me. And that's always been something that I wish we had more of, but now, like, retrospectively, I think it's very fitting that this is the only episode that we had it for. I think that it very much adds to the emotional impact of the scene, and it just, like, I don't know, it makes it feel more special. But yeah, this was, I can remember sitting in my closet in 2020 with my blanket over my head while we were on, like, a Zoom call. And it was me, Matt, Chris, and Scott just kind of directed us a little bit through it. And if I remember right, we actually had to re-record ours because, like, somebody's audio got lost or something like that. And yeah, so that part was not fun, but it was fun to be able to just, like, play off of each other live in the moment. And, you know, Matt, who plays Elliot, is a good friend of mine, but, like, we never get to work together in that aspect. And
usually submitting lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The, you know, most of our, the only time that we get to play those characters together live is at a table reading. And so having this big emotional moment between these two, it was really special to be able to do that live and really have that kind of organic reactions to each other.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I wish we had more of it, but I'm grateful for what we did. And I just, it makes it, I don't know, it's just fun.
Yeah. Scott, how was it from a directional standpoint doing more of these live recordings? And I mean, I don't know if you did multiple takes or if it was something where you just kind of wanted to go organically with what was there, but I assume this was a very different challenge than usual when people are kind of sending in multiple takes and the director is compiling those appropriately.
Yeah. Typically we did a recorded rehearsal and then 2 takes of each scene. And Cass was there as well. I think at all of them, if not most of them. There might have been one that you couldn't come to.
I think it was all of them.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, we would just, you know, kind of exchange notes about what we were hearing and things we wanted to hear different on a different take. You know, moments we wanted to play bigger or more dramatic or smaller in some cases. Yeah, I know that Cass was really nervous about it.
Yes.
Because they had never directed like that before, like actually directing the actors and not just like picking which take to use. So I would like to know what that experience was like for them.
I feel like honestly, I feel like with the live recordings, like I didn't contribute a whole lot because I was like really overwhelmed by, because I've never, like Scott said, I've never like directed like a live performance before. So because I know exactly how I want the take to sound in my head, but I have trouble communicating that to other people. So it was very much like I'm going to drop you into the pool and see how you do, like learn how to swim that way. But I think because we did it over the course of 2 days, right? We like scheduled them. I think it was like over a weekend.
Yeah, I think we did 2 on one day and 3 on another.
So I think
right.
the first couple I was mostly just like, sounds good. And then like by the last few I had a little more I'd figured out how to like effectively communicate what I wanted out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Expanding the conversation a little bit here to sort of this last stretch of episodes, of which we only have 7 left. How long ago did you, the writers, come up with the ending for Geek by Night? And when did you start sort of steering the show in that direction towards that ending?
Last season, right? Because I've always had like a vague idea. I know that we had been talking a lot about like what the end like looks like in the distance,
right?
You know, and how we're like aiming all of our ships toward there. But in terms of like what the ending became, there are like certain elements of it that have remained unchanged, and other elements of it that have evolved over time, just through writing these characters, I would say. But yeah, I would say like things started aiming in that direction with the new normal. The first episode of season 2
Sure.
Is sort of where, because before that we had written like 2 episodes of the show that were never recorded. That was like a different take on back when the show was just going to keep going, in perpetuity. Like we had written these other episodes, and I think we even did a table read of one of them. And we scrapped that, entirely, and kind of started over, and that's where we ended up with the new normal and this sort of like, I think we went in and we kind of broke the season in broad strokes in terms of like what it would be, and then actually like getting in there has been a very different process. But I would say that's about when we started like aiming in that direction toward an ending. And then in terms of this season was in that initial break where we broke all of these episodes out, starting with the new normal to the finale, the presumed finale. This section of that story was only 4 episodes.
Oh, wow.
And then once we got in there, we realized 2 of those episodes were 3-part episodes. Which I blame myself mostly for that, because I'm being very ambitious with this, because I kind of didn't want to leave anything on the table. I didn't want to leave any gas in the tank. I wanted to feel like when we all walked away from this show, the cast and crew and the 3 of us, that we all felt like, yeah, no, we did everything that we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, based on the scripts anyway, I feel like we got there. And I'm very, very proud of these batch of episodes. But yeah, there's it's evolved certainly over time. The next episode starts basically part 1 of a 3-part arc that was originally just 1 episode. And then the finale, and it was so funny because the finale was always planned as feature length. And so, you know, we were like, yeah, it's a feature length episode. No big deal. We'll be able to fit all this in a feature length episode. And no, instead the finale is a 3-part story. Each is like over 60 pages. And then the finale is still feature length. Like it's still like a 90-minute episode. So, yeah, that's my fault. I fully blame myself for that. But I think, you know, I was just very concerned about giving people, and myself, selfishly, the ending that I think is going to make the most people happy. And hopefully we pulled it off. I think we did. I'm very happy.
Agreed.
But we'll see what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, you know, it's so funny. I mean, there's a reason that we took a 3-year break. And when I look back at some of the versions of, even the versions of the next episode, the next arc, it's like crazy. I can't wait to talk to you, Benny, about the what ifs and the different avenues we tried taking. But it's so funny, listening to Filling the Void. I hadn't read or listened to any of it since, you know, we wrote the finale and recorded the lines for it, you know, which we have done mostly. And so it's really, really satisfying hearing these characters be like, I'm kind of feeling this way, or I'm kind of feeling like this. And I'm like, oh, wow, like
Yeah.
we really set this up really well. And the finale, like the finale is just was so satisfying to write. And I think we had trouble saying goodbye, which is why it's 90 minutes or whatever, however long it ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think the ground we cover in that finale is as hopefully as for fans of the show is going to be as satisfying as it was for us to write.
So I am the only one in this room who has not heard or read anything else for the rest of the season. So I wanted to, before we wrap up here, I wanted to go around the table and ask everybody, without spoilers, to describe the rest of this season in one word. Chelsi, let's start with you.
Weird.
I like to hear that. Cass, what about you?
Ambitious.
Okay. Nick?
Affirming.
I like that.
I guess this is coming from me as like how I've always felt about what the end of the show is. So but I think when people listen to it, they'll be like, what is he talking about? Inevitable.
As all good endings
Is how
are.
I would
Okay.
describe it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I like to end every episode by letting anyone at the table give shout outs to anybody else for their contributions to this episode. We only have 4 of you in the room right now, but Geek by Night is a labor of love by a lot of different people in a lot of different roles. So I wanted to open the floor here and let anybody here give any shout outs.
I think everyone did a fantastic job. But and I'm sure, everyone's going to shout out somebody different, but I have to shout out Chris O'Connor, who just, the thing about what Gibson is going through in this episode, it's sort of like he's sort of reflecting on stuff he's already gone through. He's not really changing at all in this episode. But the subtlety of the performance that Chris gives to Gibson, and just like it's subtle and it's small, and it's like listening back to this episode as many times as I have. Every time I heard Chris O'Connor's performance in that May scene, I was just like kind of blown away by how much he brought to, not that much. Because like I said, he's not going through a lot. He's more reacting to the other 2 people in the scene and reflecting on stuff he's already gone through. So it really blew me away. The level of performance that he gave in this episode. It was really, really fantastic.
For sure.
So
I would like to shout out Cass because of especially now that I know that that Cass had really written a lot of the Elliot and Gretchen stuff. I also have been wanting Elliot and Gretchen to break up for a long time.
Yes.
So it was a lot of fun for me to be able to have that really kind of heightened emotional conversation and just really kind of break that open. And I feel like the breakup of Elliot and Gretchen is handled very tenderly and in a way that, I don't know, feels good and healthy and safe, and also feels very it feels like Elliot and Gretchen. It doesn't, they don't seem like the type to have some big blowout, but I appreciate how you wrote their care for each other while also caring for themselves. And
Thank you.
Yeah,
They're just in different parts of their life now.
yes.
Yeah,
Can I shout out 2?
absolutely.
Okay. So my first one is Naomi Wong. She kills it every time.
Always.
But editing those scenes and trying to decide which take to go through, I was weeping every time I listened to those lines. So she's phenomenal. She's great. And my second one is, I know there isn't a lot of score in this episode on purpose, but what we do get, the new music, especially the scene where they're saying goodbye to Underdog Comics. I want to shout out Scott Tofty because I was listening to that as well, and I was like crying. So like it was perfect. It was perfect.
Really, really good.
Yeah, and to tease episode 2, World of Tomorrow, Scott has been over the past couple of weeks playing me like, hey, here's the scene with Tofty's score, and I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me?
That's awesome.
So good.
Yeah.
I would love, everyone crushed it in this episode. But I think, the two that really stood out to me listening to it that I just wanted to shout out here now that I have the opportunity to. I was lucky enough to tell Chris on a Dueling Genre Tonight episode. I was like, hey man, you crushed it. And so I was like, okay, cool. I did that. I really, really love Morgan's performance in this episode. I think we're all just so proud of Mindy as writers, and just kind of hearing, Morgan does this really beautiful thing where she kind of like catches herself as she's talking about how she's going to miss Underdog Comics. And like, I think her love of that place and her relationship with that place is you can forget it because she's so cool for school. But I don't know, my heart breaks when I imagine 8-year-old Mindy or 10-year-old Mindy, like her childhood was spent there too. And she's also kind of mourning something ending the way that I think we all do as we kind of hit that age. And she just gets to do so much fun stuff this season. And I can't wait. And also, they're just realizing they're in the same vignette, but but I guess to honor Tofty as an actor, the fact that he's able to go so big and goofy as Max, but then, he has, I can't remember which of us wrote this line, but he's like, I when I like something, I want more of it.
Yeah.
Is just like, oh, that is him. And he is such like something so childlike about him, but also you buy the humanity of it. He isn't just like a big cartoon character. So I really love what we do with Max this season.
Yeah. And if I could give a shout out, I would give it to Max's counterpart in that scene, which is Paul Mackey playing Cosmo. We really got a lot of Cosmo in this episode, and it was really cathartic to hear two characters kind of address how one genuinely hurt the other and are able to come to some new understanding as people learn and grow and move forward with their lives. So that scene was really affecting for me, and I got a lot out of Paul's performance. Any last notes on Filling the Void before we wrap up here?
You ain't seen nothing yet. I'll say that.
Yeah, I have to say, listening back to this episode, knowing where it goes, I was a little surprised listening back at like, oh, there's so much that has not happened yet. It is so exciting to know how much you guys are gonna learn in the next couple months. It's a lot, but it's good.
I'm so stoked. All right, so I want to say thank you to all the guests that I had today, Scott, Cass, Nick, Chelsi, for joining me, and thank you to all of you, the fans, the underdogs, for listening today. If you'd like to support the show, please join the Dueling Genre Patreon at duelinggenre.com/support. You'll also get access to classic Geek by Night episodes, scripts, and other behind-the-scenes materials, as well as bonus content from some of Dueling Genre's best shows, including weekly episodes of Dueling Genre Tonight. You can also tell your friends, families, and followers to subscribe to Geek by Night on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening to this right now. Finally, if you like the show, please leave a positive rating for it on iTunes. Thank you for going beyond Geek by Night with us. Have a super day.